we've already talked about, we have childhood in order to play. Play isn't something we do to fill time in childhood because what else are you going to do? Childhood actually extends in length in order to create time for play. And I found, so this is a terrific book as well. I'm going to put all these in the show notes, but David F. Lancy, The Anthropology of Childhood, Cherubs, Chattel, Changelings. So he's an anthropologist who has done, as far as I can tell, the only sort of compendium of anthropological literature on childhood. And you can see how many book darts I have in that. So this is a well-loved book. But there's just one thing in here, 220. He says, and this is just amazing, a hypothesis from 1898 from a book called The Play of Animals. This guy named Gruss says, animals do not play because they are young. They have their youth because they play. That's early, totally, right? Like perfect. that's just post-Darwin. So that's remarkable. And then just after that, in this book, Lancy describes something that Diane Fossey with the mountain gorillas said about them. So in Rwanda's Parc de Volcan, I can't speak.
You can.
It's the volcano park. The Mahoro mountain gorilla troop, first habituated by Diane Fossey, has several juveniles, and play, especially after the morning feeding session, is almost nonstop. So again, as in many of the great ape studies, the animals are being provisioned in order to sort of bring them into a place where they can be observed. So that is, they're not entirely in their totally normal wild state. But so they've morning feeding, play is almost nonstop. One juvenile repeatedly twirled himself in a circle, falling down in apparent dizziness. I observed, this is Fossey. I observed youngsters climbing up and down a slender 5-meter high tree and exaggerating the swaying motion as they climbed, dangling from either hand or foot while grasping and waving large leaves they'd removed. Aside from solo locomotor play on the ground and in the tree, juveniles chased each other in games of tag and tussled in rough and tumble play involving as many as 3 players at a time. They pulled each other off the tree, dropped bomb-like from the tree on top of their playmates, and rustled in a rolling fur ball. Trying to distinguish body parts among the entwined animals was impossible. In the space of 40 minutes, the jungle gym tree they'd been using had been utterly destroyed, and the surrounding low bush had been flattened into a lawn. So, this happens in suburbia, and no adults let that happen, right? Like, it's not allowed. It's not allowed, but kids want to be able to do this. And occasionally it's because they want the destruction, but usually it's not. The destruction is a side effect. And we need to be allowing them into spaces where destruction is allowed to happen, not because we want to encourage destructive tendencies at all, but because we want to encourage rough and tumble play, unstructured play, falling on each other, all of these things, tag and tug of war, and all of these things in which the children themselves are deciding what the rules are and who gets to play and how to bring in others and how to scold others and how not to run to the authorities whenever anything goes wrong or someone's feelings get hurt.
Yeah. And, you and I remember how different a world it was in the 70s and early 80s when kids used to play with, the neighborhood kids would get together and play in the street, and the adults didn't necessarily know where they were or, when they were going to be back. And this changed as a result of essentially a panic over the abduction of children, which obviously children do get abducted, but they weren't really being abducted in large numbers from their front lawns. It's typically people who know them who abduct them. And
this is one of Skenesi's main points. Like we live in a culture of fear. Like fear is being used to control us. And for the most part, the things that you're scared of, the stranger danger, isn't a danger.
Right. And it's a byproduct, our feeling about it is a byproduct of the way news, even honorable news, collects stories that cause people to watch. And so it exaggerates hazards and caused effectively the death of an entire type of play. But what has replaced it is the question, right? To the extent that children, instead of going outside and riding their bikes and their skateboards and their whatever else, are sitting in front of screens, even if what they're doing has a value, it's consumptive rather than productive, right?
Yes.
It is very rare. I mean, there are exceptions. I think, why am I forgetting the name of that computer game in which you build
Tetris?
Minecraft? Minecraft is a place where kids can be productive in a way that matters. I don't know what fraction of what goes on in Minecraft is that way, but it's at least possible to do useful stuff that actually teaches you. But to the extent that what you're doing is just consuming content, you're actually training yourself to be a consumer rather than training yourself to manage risks. And then there's the question about what happens if your childhood is filled with super cool snippets of video, right? Like amazing stunts and things. Does that make you more likely to be able to do amazing stunts, or does it make you feel like there's nothing you could possibly do that would be interesting because you've seen the most amazing stunts?
Yeah.
Right?
I'll never get there. I'm not that good. I couldn't possibly achieve anything like this. Why try?
Right. And you get a lot of the joy of it, of going, wow, that's really cool. Yeah. And it is cool. But the point is, it doesn't lead you in the right direction. It doesn't incentivize you. Your friend does some cool wheelie on their bike and you think, yeah, I want to do that too. And maybe you discover the wheelie tree, which is what allows you to learn how to do a wheelie where you hang onto a branch and balance your bike. But the last thing I want to say is that the video games, especially video games the way they exist now, where you have these massive multiplayer social games, which in the one way are better because they are social. So at least even if kids aren't sitting with each other, they get interaction and they develop something like a friendship and all of that. Yeah. But the point is it decouples the kind of camaraderie and danger facing that we used to do in the street with our bikes and whatever, and has put it into a realm where the dangers aren't real and they probably don't inform you very well about anything in the real world, right? And they sort of give you the social reinforcement for something that isn't useful. It's wasting your mental capacity for these things. And what will that do to adults? Yeah. Well, I'm reminded of
the gang of kids playing in the streets that I did. I don't think it was a consistent part of my childhood, but there was at least several months when there were a number of kids in my neighborhood, and we played a game that we called Greek gods and goddesses, and we each chose one of them and to embody, and we roamed the neighborhood enacting.
No, not Rome.
Roamed.
I know. I just sorry. I was being a little pedantic.
Yeah. Being what we saw as, perhaps the best, but also the worst of that person. And I have a little bit of a hard time imagining that everyone else was as into Greek mythology as I was at that point. But God, it was so much fun and so free. And we were also, I grew up in West LA in the 70s and 80s. And as I remember it anyway, we were certainly allowed to roam freely across all of the front yards, and I think across a lot of the backyards too. Yeah. And just, do our, in my case, I always chose Athena. I was Athena, and I got to do the Athena stuff in the neighborhood with all the other boys and girls, and it was just extraordinary. Sure, it was. And you were probably on bikes often on bikes, but I remember all the kids in the neighborhood, and it was nearly constant for much of the year, Yeah. Well, that's a benefit, of course, being in Southern California. Yeah. Right. And, we got into a lot of trouble. And I think almost none of that trouble was at my instigation. But nonetheless, I learned a lot about trouble and why you shouldn't get into most trouble and you should get into other kinds of trouble and how to tell the difference and all of that. And, again, I hate to be the wagging your finger and get off my lawn guy, but there is a question about whether or not the play you are engaged in has any utility whatsoever with respect to the adult stuff you're going to be expected to do, right? And, the bike stuff, the running around the neighborhood, that stuff had relevance, right? Not exact. It wasn't precise. But the point is, the same stuff that allows you to navigate the hazards of biking around your neighborhood and jumping off of curbs and leaping over hedges and all of that is about the physical world and what can happen there. Yeah. I think I'm going to disagree with you a little bit here, though. I think that we specifically do not want to hold play to any such standard. I think we want to encourage unstructured play in which the children choose the thing. And I want it embodied. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm saying that if somebody else has fed you a video game in which the idea is that you're going to,
I don't know, pursue goodies of some kind or blow stuff up. The point is, it's not even clear that the lessons in it are inherently true. Right.
Well,
Unstructured physical play, the lessons are inherently physical.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the distinction for me, because I think you and I actually do have we aren't just opposed to video games, right? Like we have actually seen it, in many of our former students as well, that in some cases, gaming was a way to allow them some social interaction before they felt that they were sort of capable of doing so themselves. And, that said, for me, the issue is one of disembodiment, but also one of consumption. And so the more interactive, such that you can actually change the rules of the game and decide your own fate and interact with others, and they can also give you feedback on what it is that's going on, the better the game is. And so, an entirely passive thing is the least play-like. Right. And it's the most school-like, frankly. And it's part of why school is failing the way that it is.
I'm going to make the same point I always make, which is, it's actually two different points. One is, it's not the box, it's the business model.
Yeah.
Right. When the idea of the video game is to keep your attention and prevent you from wanting to do anything else because what you're doing is so visually rewarding or puts you in situations that are so socially rewarding, whatever it is, the point is you've optimized for something that isn't about you. It's for whatever corporation made the thing.
Right.
And the other is that, I hate to make this point about play, but I think it is actually in some sense the central theme of what we've been talking about is it's all well and good to have fun when you're playing, and you should. Fun is one of the driving motivations, but the purpose is not entertainment, right? The purpose is not even recreation. Recreation is the wrong modality. The idea is to usefully upgrade your software. And the reason that play is fun is because if you do it, your software gets upgraded.
Well, it's the distinction, and it's one that we make in the book, although not on this particular point, between the junk version of something and the full version. So junk food, junk sex, junk play.
Yep.
Right?
Totally. Junk play is the perfect description. Yep.
Yeah. So one last thing. There's an article from 2001, which you can show briefly here, Zach, called Mammalian Play Training for the Unexpected, published in the Quarterly Review of Biology in 2001, as I say. And their functional hypothesis that they make here is that play enables animals to develop flexible kinematic and emotional responses to unexpected events in which they experience a sudden loss of control. Specifically. And that may not sound all that new. It's from 2001, but this article is actually great. It's in Quarterly Review. So it's a big, good journal. It's a good journal and a very good article. And they make actually, I didn't write it down, but I think it's like 24 different precise predictions, this article, which is just a really good sign. So let me say, but I just want to share the first prediction here. But first, they say, and it's a review article, so they say play is nearly ubiquitous in all mammalian orders, which suggests either a common ancestry for play or similar selective pressures on all of those different orders. Yep. And there may be some of that, but clearly the most parsimonious explanation is that play is part of being a mammal.
Right. Did you have someplace further you were going?
Well, I've got a lot of stuff, but
go for it.
Okay. Their major hypothesis, as I said, although this is their description of it as opposed to in the abstract, is that a major ancestral function of play is to rehearse behavioral sequences in which animals lose full control over their locomotion, position, or sensory spatial input and need to regain those faculties quickly. Mm-hmm. And further, a sort of a sub-hypothesis is that we hypothesize that animals in play learn how to deal with the emotional aspect of being surprised or temporarily disoriented or disabled. And then furthermore, in adverse social situations, emotional overreaction may lead to undue escalation of conflicts. So that right there, and that is what we were seeing sort of society-wide. And then let's see, I've highlighted the first prediction. If I can find it, here we go. Prediction from this article. The amount of play experience obtained affects the ability to physically and emotionally handle unexpected events and temporary handicaps. Animals deprived of play, be it by natural circumstances or artificial manipulation, will be less able to deal with such situations.
So, in some ways, if you interface this with the various models in our book, This is a rehearsal for useful application of consciousness. That effectively the conscious mind is navigating situations for which you don't have a pre-written program, and that, you know, if you're thrown by such a situation, then you're not going to be in it. You know, basically you don't have enough practice with your conscious mind in order to deploy it usefully.
Yep.
And bad things will happen. You could, as we were talking about a few minutes ago, you could take a situation in which something has gone wrong and panic your way into death or into further lostness in the Amazon or whatever it is that happens.
And let me just say, not just panic your way necessarily, but anxiety your way too. I mean, I think anxiety is, by many measures, a sort of a lesser form of panic, and that the rise of anxiety disorders is exactly in line with the decline of children being allowed to be children.
Oh, this is good, because if you think about it, if you put all these models together, the idea is that which is unexpected ought to trigger your conscious mind, which needs to have played usefully in order to know what to do when it is triggered. Precisely. And if you interrupt this process, then the thing that should cause you to go into this secondary mode where you figure out how to usefully get out of your situation or to make some other value from it, just results in paralysis or chaotic behavior or whatever.
Yeah, your nervous system is just constantly triggered. Like, actually, you're just in high alert all the time, and you can't be calm, and you can't make good decisions, and you can't innovate.
Yep. Yeah. Does look a bit like what we're seeing.
It does. It does.